Hello and welcome back, class. Let's continue with Act 3, Scene 3. The murderers have um, chased down Banquo and Fleance. As we know, Banquo is attacked as he says to his son, "Fly, fly, fly, thou mayest revenge," right? Treachery. Uh, Fleance escapes, right? Banquo is murdered. And in the next scene, it opens with the Macbeth's first dinner party as king and queen. And I think it's safe to say that this feast is an absolute failure. Um, Notice how Macbeth is, uh, in some ways, distracted after the murderers give him uh, the news, right? There's blood upon thy face. Remember, just like Macbeth had blood on his hands, the blood is a symbol of the guilt, and 'tis Banquo's. And they inform him, right? Yes, we did kill Banquo, but Fleance has escaped. And what does he say? Then comes my fit again. He gets anxiety. He gets that fit, if you would, that psychological overtaking of his reasoning powers, right? I had else been perfect, whole as the marble, founded as the rock, as broad and general as the casing air. But now I am cabined, cribbed, confined, bound into saucy doubts and fears. Look at that alliteration to emphasize just how anxious and paranoid and stressed he is. I think you put all three of those together. So as the murderers depart, right? Thanks for that. There, the groaned serpent lies. Again, he's got this idea. He keeps coming back to this snake imagery, that will come back to bite him. Banquo will, because he's escaped. And again, one cannot help but think of the allusions to Satan in the Garden of Evil, and this notion that for Macbeth, right, that snake will come back, but to bite him for his illogical deeds. He remember, he recognized that he should not have done this before he did it. So Lady Macbeth, again, just like she had to reprint, she had to go and replace the daggers because he didn't fulfill that part of the plan. Then he kills the guards and he starts talking about it, with that appeal to pity, that crime of passion defense, and she has to distract everyone after Duncan's body is discovered. Well, now for the third time, she has to cover for him, right? She's saying everybody is here, and yet you're not entertaining them, right? They're here for you, and so we see as he goes back to join the guests, the ghost of Banquo enters, and again he's hallucinating. It's a physical manifestation of his paranoia, and this notion of ghosts is extremely apropos around when you think about Halloween, right? The ghost of old King Hamlet, the ghost of Banquo appearing here again. When ghosts appear, are they real? Number one, and if they are real, do you believe them? Do you trust them? Do you trust their ethos? And that's essentially what Hamlet's predicament is he doesn't know if he can trust what the ghost of his father says to him to be true. Um, just like in some ways, Macbeth and Banquo are unable to 100% say they can trust the witch's prophecies. Um, Now, remember the post hoc fallacy. Just because something happens before something doesn't necessarily mean it causes it. We call that false cause. But Macbeth, in some ways, indulges his own fantasies by saying, well, the witches said this was going to happen, and then it happened. So they said I was going to be king, just like Cawdor, so I might as well kill Duncan to become king. Again, that's not logical reasoning. That's a fallacious argument, but he lets his emotions take over his appeals to logic, and his hubris fuels his illogical decision making process. So everybody is reacting, right? Like, what's going on here? Because he's talking to the ghost, right? And he says, "Thou canst not say I did it. Never shake thy gory locks at me." Imagine that he's sitting there talking to his ghost, and everybody's sitting at the table, like, "Who are you talking to?" Right? So what does Ross say? His Highness is not well. And what does she say? Again, she tries to take away from it. Oh, no, this happens all the time. Say, worthy friends, my lord is often thus, and hath been from his use. Pray you, keep seat. The fit is momentary. Upon a thought, he will again be well. If much you note him, you shall offend him and extend his passion. Feed and regard him not. Oh, no, 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 just don't worry about it. If you make notice of it, then that'll offend him. So just eat and pretend like you're not even seeing him. He does this all the time. What? He'll be fine in a minute, right? And then what did she say to him? Are you a man? He says, I am a bold one that dare look on that, which might appall the devil. Then he's looking at the ghost of Banquo, or so he thinks. And she says, oh, proper stuff. This is the very painting of your fear. This is the air-drawn dagger which you said led you to Duncan. Oh, these flaws and starts. Impostors to true fear would well become a woman's story at a winter's fire, authorized by her grandam. Shame itself, right? Are you a man? Because what? Just like you saw the bloody dagger, this is just an abstraction of your fears, right? You're like, would well become a woman's story at a winter's fire, authorized by her grandam, right? Like a scary story, a ghost story that a woman would tell at a fire that her grandma told her. Again, notice all of the significant mentions to masculinity, to femininity. This notion of gender criticism continues to present itself as a possible focus for analysis of the play, in addition to queer theory, in addition to cultural criticisms, in addition to Marxist criticisms and reader response criticisms, and you could just psychological criticisms. This play is ripe for an analysis from all of those perspectives. So keep that in mind, not just for essay 3, but for essay 4 as well. So he really freaks out and he starts yelling at the ghost, right? And the ghost leaves and she says, what, quite unmanned in folly, right? And again, she questions his masculinity, like, what's going on here? And he says, if I stand here, I saw him. And she says, fie, for shame, right? You should be ashamed of yourself is what she keeps telling him, right? The shame again in the lines earlier. So he again explains what he feels is going on. And she says, my worthy lord, your noble friends do lack you. And he says, I do forget. Do not muse at me, my most worthy friends. I have a strange infirmity, which is nothing to those who know me. Come, love and health to all. Then I'll sit down. Give me some wine, fill full. Oh, folks, don't worry about it, right? Because she's like, hey, dude, you're guests. You need to, and again, he tries to make it seem duplicity, right? Appearances versus reality, seeming versus being in Macbeth. Right? He makes it seem as though everything's okay, yet the guests are not in any way, shape, or form, placated by that. Because again, the ghost of Banquo comes in again, and he starts talking about toasting, and then everybody's drinking. But notice what happens here. He then starts screaming at the ghost. Thy blood is cold. Thou hast no speculation in those eyes, which thou dost glare with, right? And so what does she say? Because everybody's like, what the heck's going on? Think of this, good peers, but as a thing of custom, 'tis no other. Only it spoils the pleasure of the time. Oh yeah, this kind of happens all the time. This is just his strangeness, his weird habits. And then again, he starts talking about how brave he is and talking about bears and rhinoceros and hence horrible shadow, unreal mockery, hence, right? And then the ghost leaves, and what does he say? Why so being gone? Why so being gone? I am a man again, right? And what does she say? You have displaced the mirth, broke the good meeting with most admired disorder. What? You're just going to act like everything's okay now and you're a man again? Nobody's having fun anymore. You messed up this whole dinner. It's a colossal failure because of him being demonstrative, right? Plagued by these, he demonstrates these psychological issues, his paranoia, his anxiety, his guilt, right? Um, and he says, how, right? How can everybody else keep the natural ruby of your cheeks when mine is blanched with fear? And everybody, right? If you're seeing what I'm seeing, right? After she says, you ruin the party. He says, well, isn't everybody, how can you all just not be shocked by this? And Ross says, what sights, my lord? Again, just like when Hamlet sees the ghost, when he's in that scene with his mother, in I believe it's Act 3, Scene 4, and she doesn't see the ghost, and she's like, "What are you looking at?" So again, we see how his mind is plagued, right, by these various psychological issues resulting from his guilt, resulting from his unnatural act, just as he thought it might be. So she says, don't talk to him, questions enrage him, speak not, everybody, adios. So everybody leaves. And then Macbeth, right, in this, right, he starts telling her about his paranoia, right? And she says, almost at odds, right? And he says, what is the night? What time is it? How late it is? And she says, almost at odds with morning, which is which? And he says, did you send for Macduff? Right? Or I'm sorry, he brings up Macduff. He says, I can't believe he didn't come to the feast. And she says, well, did you send for him? And he said, I did. He heard about it, but I have servants that I keep in his house. I keep a servant feed. I will tomorrow, and betimes I will to the weird sisters. More shall they speak, for now I am bent to know by the worst means the worst. So he's saying, no, I'm going to take care of Macbeth tomorrow. I have servants in his house. I'll find out why he wasn't here. Right? Then I'm going to go see the witches, because at this point, I want to know everything. He is committed to indulging his hubris, his nihilistic fantasies, right? Or nihilistic desires, this nothingness. He just wants to wipe out any possible threats. For mine own good, all causes shall give way. I am in blood stepped in so far that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as go over. Right? Look at this line here. And this is a really important line in the play, because now we learn where he's at psychologically. Everything I do is going to be for mine own good. Extremely selfish, right? Extremely egotistical. I am in blood stepped in so far. I've done so much killing and bad stuff. I have so much guilt manifested on my hands from the blood. I should wade no more. Returning were as tedious as go over. I could stop killing or I could keep killing, but I'm so deep, weighted in blood. I've killed so many people, it kind of would just be tedious to stop or tedious to keep going. Life has no meaning for him. Tedious is the word he uses. If he's going to keep killing people or stopping killing people. I mean, when I think of tedious, I think of like something that, you don't want to do, but it's, something you kind of have to do. It's like kind of boring. It's tedious for him. Life has no meaning. We see here, this is absurd to think that to keep killing or to stop killing, either way would be tedious, right? Strange things I have in head that will to hand, which must be acted ere they may be scanned. Now he realizes, right? I'm not going to think about things anymore. I'm just going to act, especially on my evil desires, which is the complete antithesis of critical thinking. And we see that this character has now descended into a mental state that foregoes all logic, and he's just ruled by one illogical idea, one fallacy, one hidden assumption, one hubristic tendency after another, right? And she says, you lack the season of all natures, sleep. Now this is interesting, because remember, they're plagued by anxiety resulting from their guilt, they're paranoid, and they can't sleep. And the thing about sleep is even bad people need to sleep. Everybody needs to sleep. It's interesting how she calls it the season of all natures, right? It's necessary for our bodies. And to think that you could continue functioning without sleep, again, I think would be a sign of hubris, and the lack of sleep resulting from their guilty conscience and anxiety, right, is a direct manifestation of their guilt. And their paranoia is a direct manifestation of their guilt and the fact that they did an unnatural act. right? They did an illogical act, and now, right, it's gotten the causal chain moving, and they are just becoming um, studies in psychological issues. So, and he just says, "Well, we are yet but young indeed. Oh, it's just that we haven't done this enough. We'll get used to it." Again, one illogical assumption and thought after another. So we see here the characters, their identities, psychological issues. Um, we see different various gender presentations, and I think that this particular act and scene in the play is especially one that could be examined from various critical thinking perspectives. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for listening. And until next time,